So if you look at like throwers and punchers and pitchers, quarterbacks, it's, you know, all the movements look different, but there's those commonalities where it all starts.
All right, Judd, so this is the piece I've been telling you about. It's called the X Factor. So X Factor in a couple different directions. Well, obviously it looks like an X from the side. But if you look at the different planes of the body when doing most movement from sport, whether it's punching, kicking, running, as you well know, everything's working from across lateral. So if you look at from a side view, you'll see an X. If you look at the front view, you'll see an X created. And obviously from the top, we call the separation that we always try to get from the hip and shoulder. So it creates an X. Well, all those three X's converge right here, which would be the core, right? So, and there's also, you talk about athletes on the field, there's weight room strength, and then some of them just have the X factor. A lot of that is what type of force can you produce, but also receive in this position. So with this piece, we've kind of taken some of the pieces from the push-pull world already, but made it more accessible for the specific coach that has one of them, and you could run through it pretty quickly. So I'll kind of show you some of the stuff that we're doing. So what I'll usually do, I'll load in from the push side first. I'll take a staggered stance. I'll grab the pull side. Now I could push and pull at the same time, stabilizing in the front and the back from the quad, the hip, the glute, and push through. Could drop it, move to the other side.
It's a very quick transition time.
Very quick transition. Now, if you have a little bit more stroke that's needed, you could flip this out of the way. And this just allows for that elbow to come back even further. For me, I don't really need to, but always liked how much stuff that you're doing from a staggered stance.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see what your mind could come up with.
So just like the basic concept, there's two things that I'm big on. I'm big on cross pattern movement, like we talked about. That goes into the whole X thing you're referring to.
Right.
And I call them my flows, but it's really sequencing from
Okay.
the ground up. So this is a ground-based piece of equipment, which is invaluable. So just we'll go with the basic movement here, but it starts with the sequence of the dig into the ground, and then you can transfer that force through the hip, through the push, while you're doing the cross pattern motion. So I just think the ability to quickly, use a piece of equipment that can translate into both a cross pattern and a limb sequencing. So like all the athletic.
So you're driving from that hip, much like we would in throwing or kicking.
Exactly.
You're driving through that hip that actually creates that lateral sling coming across from the block leg into the. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's easy to do that with like medicine balls and things like that, but it's hard to find pieces of equipment that you can add a lot of weight to.
Sure.
Where you can practice that ground-based, athletic sequence and get that cross pattern effect too.
Mm-hmm. So you're really, from that standpoint, you're starting the movement with that right hip pushing forward?
Yeah, I'm actually starting with, very specific, the inside edge of the ball of my right foot is where I'm call it knife edging. Mm-hmm. I started there. That's where the force is generated. And then I'll internally rotate this leg, which will move this hip bone towards the position I'm trying to throw.
Correct.
So if you look at like throwers and punchers and pitchers, quarterbacks, it's, all the movements look different, but there's those commonalities where it all starts with a disassociation, like you're talking about with that X.
Right, and that creates a stretch across this, and as this, it creates a stretch across
and
that.
if you just look at this piece right here, that can be, the end of a football throw. If the leg comes up, it's the end of the baseball pitch. A boxing, something. It's a common movement pattern where you don't really have to specialize something for a pitcher versus a thrower versus a putter. You know?
Yeah, basically every sport, that's why we, again, kind of call it the X Factor. People that could do this really good generally are pretty dangerous on the field.
So, even like discus, you'll see this.
Of course.
Yeah.
That position, shot put, kicking, punching.
And then even things in sports where you don't associate with throwing, the ability to disassociate. So I always say, I used to be a linebacker. When I know a linebacker is past his best days, is when they lose that ability to open their hips independent of their chest, when they start to get real stiff here.
Right, so you call it disassociate, we call it separation.
Separation, yes.
That's what we just thought, we called it create the X.
Create the X,
It's from here to here when you could do that, or almost the reverse, create it out of there.
Yep.
But yeah.
Because that's how you create torque.
Correct.
That's how you, so if I have to turn together, and then something, and I have to turn everything. It's a lot slower than if I could just here and just flip my hips, right?
Right.
So even for athletes that aren't throwing an object, it's an invaluable ability.
Right. And so that's not only mobility and flexibility, but that's also strength to pull you quicker into those positions.
Absolutely, yeah. Right. And then we talked about, I think briefly, the D-lineman, how important that is to be able to not just do that, but prevent that from being done to you.
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean?
To not create space by getting turned on the line.
Exactly, yeah.
So that would be kind of, we talked about a couple different ideas of there's a concentric, what you would say is pushing that hip through and slamming it home. But
Yes.
then there's also an eccentric where we could either work with additional resistance or time coming back to make a more of an eccentric piece.
Absolutely, this has the possibility to even be partner assisted. So they pull, and then you have a partner.
Yeah,
off
sure.
something
Let's
that
try it out.
So if we have maybe a thick band or something, we can hook
Sure.
on. And then I'll pull here, and then I'll get it here, and then you give me a little tug, and then it's like in a partner assisted eccentric overload. And I'm having to use that front foot to really brace and prevent that.
So where are you getting it the most? I would say a lot in that front quad, stabilizing.
And then the eccentric component here.
Eccentric through the lat.
Yeah, to prevent you from being pulled.
Sure.
that
So
way.
now we could go emphasis on the pull or the push.
So one thing we haven't thought about is like the O linemen need that too, because when they engage a D lineman and that D lineman tries to push them through, the coaches always talk about they need that front stable leg so they don't get pulled over that front leg. So
yeah.
things like that.
So yeah, in the throws world, we would always talk about posting on that front leg.
Exactly.
You're almost running a pole vault into the block, stabilizing the front leg, and then up and over.
Yeah.
So it's almost a concentric version, but where you're saying is more eccentrically loading and planting that foot.
And then things we don't, I love finding commonalities across different sports that don't seem like they have, like an athlete is an athlete type of thing.
Right.
So like when you look at people that can jump really high, the reason they can do that is they can take that vertical or that horizontal momentum and translate it to the vertical. And when they go to plant that lead leg, they can then get high.
Right. And that's where that knee shifts over the foot just a little bit that creates that forward propulsion.
Exactly.
Instead of here.
It's like their ramp. So like when you look at Jordan or everything, they'll plant here and then they'll internally rotate here and they'll come off like that. So it's this hard plant leg here that they're having to resist that momentum and create like a ramp into the air.
Right.
So this will work that too, because the eccentric overload here, you're really having to push back with that front leg.
Gotcha. So do you want to do a couple sets and just play around a little bit? I want to see where you're obviously, if we were looking from a concentric only, and I can move this piece out of the way so it's not.
So the cool thing is too, like we can do it on this plane here, right? We can even like sit back on a little bit too.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Now, what would be the difference of the emphasis you're trying to work on with the sitting back and sitting low?
So right here, it lowers your center of mass, so you're having to push like up and through the target here. Kind of an upward.
Almost looks more like a batter.
Yeah, exactly.
Like really coming low like that.
Yeah. So it's just awesome because you can change planes very fluidly here. To kind of find what you're trying to work on.
So I know you were talking about before, you were talking about free weights aren't free, and how machines, although they're seen as a non-variable range of motion, you like to move around that range of motion to create different emphasis. Could you show me some of that? Because I'm interested to see how you would do it with this piece. A little bit what you just did, you changed levels, but I know you were talking about changing hip positions. So yeah, I'd love to kind of understand that.
Yeah, so when something is locked into a range of motion, it almost frees up your force application because you can count on that resultant range of motion staying the same. So even though you apply force in different vectors, it doesn't affect where that weight moves. So, if I'm here, I can push up there, you know what I mean? Like up, it'll still move resultantly there.
Right.
Or I can apply force this way, right?
Right, and now you're tying in the pec more.
Exactly.
Although this is offering resistance, and it looks the same, but the intent is different.
So literally, if I push here and I put pressure through my thumb that way, I feel medial delt. Same movement path. If I push pressure through my pinky or palm, it goes from medial delt to pec. Literally the same movement, medial delt to pec, just on where I'm applying that force.
Does the foot change also, or is it all in the hand?
You would, because the foot would have to balance out the vector.
Yeah.
A lot of people should be able to do that naturally. That's a great point. You might have to point that out. So
Right.
if I push this way, it's going to pull me this way. So I'm going to have to like knife edge the outside to create that compression in. And if I push this way, I am going to have to be on the inside edge to create that compression out.
Sure. Which the interesting part for the layman, it looks the same, right?
Yeah.
Like it looks very, very similar. Like, oh, he's doing a press. It's like, no, this is changing, or this is changing. And those are those little micro.
So this kind of stuff is
variables.
close to my heart because I have a lot of injuries now, and with my rotator cuff, overhead pressing and a lot of free weights hurts. But because my rotator cuff that's torn on the side has to kick in to stabilize it, which I need to rehab that and have surgery. But in the meantime, if I still want to work the major muscle groups, if I have something like this and I can apply inward pressure, the reciprocal inhibition would take my external rotators out of it, let those relax, and I can still work the main muscle groups I'm trying to work to like work around an injury temporarily.
Sure.
Until you can get that fixed or whatever.
Sure. All right, so now what we're going to do, we're going to take that, we're going to add some accommodating resistance. So now when you're striking that hard concentric, there you go.
Yeah, then I don't even have to hold on to it then.
Right. You're,
the thing is, when you have to hold on to things, it doesn't let you like accelerate through the motion.
Right.
Because your brain tells you, I'm hanging on to something, I'm not going to continue to accelerate because whatever that thing is going to do is going to pull on me. So that's why when we try to throw things when we hang on it, it's never fully effective. We have to have an open grip. So with a lot of lifting, we have to create situations where we can have an open grip. And this, with that band, lets you do that. So I'm not worried about it flying out of my hand. So I can literally
oh, wow. Yes, you were able to actually get an extension because you have a predetermined range of motion. You know if you have your hand there, you're going to catch it. And if you don't.
And this is big enough to where I don't have to worry about missing it or hurting my hand. I can just literally look at it, and then I can just watch it come right back in my hand.
Gotcha.
And then that creates that eccentric too.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so now if we were going to do an eccentric emphasis, we could look at potential time. We could look at overload. I mean, I know when I was working with Ben Herbert, who was formerly at University of Michigan football, now with the Chargers, one of his biggest things was for linemen with a 45 stance, and they would hit, boom, and everything after that was an 4 to 8 second eccentric. So they're really breaking it, coming back with the idea they don't want to get turned on the line. And if they could come back to here, and then one more stiff arm
So the cool thing
forward.
about this is it can be a yielding isometric
Exactly.
where I push and you just resist.
Exactly. And then, so that's where you could give me the free concentric and the yielding isometric. So try that.
And that creates a little bit of leverage for you too. So.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. You get a lot of work on that front leg too.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And even thinking it could be here, simple as on the leg.
Yeah.
You know.
Very cool.
Right on.
And then, I was thinking too, like we don't always have to move both sides. This can just be held.
Right.
Or just use this like.
Stabilized. Sure. Sure. Couple other pieces.
I like the fact you can let it go.
Yes.
You know what I
A
mean?
little bit of that throw.
Because like
Now,
bench press is so risky to do you know what I mean?
A lot of stuff could go wrong, right? And then obviously you have some real simple pieces of, it could just be some hypertrophy just for some rowing.
Yes.
Either way, show me some of the ways that you were doing it before stabilized here, pressing.
Yeah. So I like the eccentrics at long length. So if you prop the leg up here, and then if you internally rotate it, you're gonna bias more the lateral hamstring muscle. So when people come over the top, especially with throwing motions, they need that eccentric strength at long length.
Right.
Because they're gonna limit their velocity because their brain knows that they can't control this piece.
Got it.
Right? So.
Let me move this out of the way.
Yeah, maybe. So you can even sit back on it a little bit. Slight bend in the knees for comfort, but you can just like let it. So right now I do a lot of this, but I have to do it on like a seated row. And this is a much better angle because it can elevate that front leg a little bit. It gets a great stretch in this hamstring. So this isn't even really for the upper body. This is just an eccentric hamstring stimulus here. And it's a great way to work on mobility for pitchers and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how else would you position yourself?
So you could turn.
I'll just let you flow for a little bit, and I want you to play with different angles.
You could turn too, so now you get the cross pattern this way. So it's pulling you this way.
To really create a heavy X.
Yeah, and then you can even, if it's really heavy, you can hand assist here. Here, pull, and if I lose strength here, I can help myself into it. And then I kind of get that chest compression here too, to kind of finish it off. Yeah, I get a great stretch all the way through here, my medial glute up into my oblique.
So that's
that
really
oblique
like
sling.
a spiral wrap around.
Yeah. So, you know, anything where you're getting thrown this way and you're having to kind of come back online, that's going to build that strength too.
Yeah, something I was playing with before was even in this position. Just.
Yeah. And that's something where that band would really.
Right. Yeah, let's band that up.
Put that here. I like that a lot, man. So that's gonna be like for people like linebackers, they're here and they're having to stay square in the hole and push that guy or push that guy's head to the side, things like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they're having to hear.
See what you think about that. Just kind of got to stand through there. Here you go. You'll probably have to go on the other side of the bar. There you go.
So now we can knife edge here, internally rotate too. You can almost picture a guy in the hole here, and they're having to clear that hole.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot, man. Can even get dynamic with it here. Back that way. That feels really good, dude.